There is a moment in life when a woman no longer looks around for validation. A moment when she no longer explains herself, argues her worth, or wastes her energy on trying to be understood. That moment is silent, and in that silence, a power begins to rise. This is the kind of silence that is not absence. It is presence, a deep, unshakable presence. When a woman stops talking to prove, to please, to fix, something remarkable begins to unfold. She becomes like water, calm on the surface, but with immeasurable depth underneath. Many have misunderstood silence as weakness. But the truth is, silence is strategy. It is observation, it is reflection, and above all, it is choice. The choice to conserve energy, the choice to redirect that energy inward, the choice to grow roots before branches. When a woman turns inward, she begins to see the world as it really is. She sees what aligns with her and what does not. She sees who drains her and who nourishes her. She sees what she was chasing and why. And then she stops. She stops chasing the people who only call when they need something. She stops running after the things she thought she needed to be happy. She stops explaining herself to those committed to misunderstanding her. And in that stillness, a shift takes place. Things begin to fall into place, not because she is controlling everything, but because she has finally released the need to. When a woman focuses on herself, she becomes magnetic. She no longer has to beg to be seen. She is seen. She no longer needs to speak to be heard. Her energy speaks, her presence speaks, her silence echoes louder than words. But this shift does not come without discomfort. The world around her may not recognize her anymore. She may lose people. She may feel alone. But what she gains is far more powerful than what she loses. She gains clarity. She gains peace. She gains herself. It is not the loud that are the strongest. It is those who walk with peace in their hearts and precision in their choices. To focus on yourself as a woman is not selfish. It is sacred. To remain silent is not passive. It is poised. When a woman steps into this alignment, when her mind, heart, and spirit are no longer scattered, she becomes unstoppable. She attracts not through effort but through essence. She no longer runs after life. Life begins to meet her exactly where she stands. And so the question is not, will the world fall apart if I stop trying to hold everything together? The real question is, what might finally fall into place if I do? This is the quiet revolution. Not the storm, but the eye of the storm. Not noise, but knowing. So to every woman listening, if you have been told that your silence is weakness, I invite you to see it differently. If you have been told that focusing on yourself is wrong, I invite you to feel how right it can be. Because when you stop scattering your energy in every direction, when you return home to yourself, when you sit in silence, not to be empty but to be full, everything around you begins to rearrange. Not by force, not by demand, but by frequency. The moment you choose to be still and focus inward, everything that belongs to you will find its way. Not because you chased it, but because you finally aligned with it. And that truly is when everything falls into place. There is a silence that speaks louder than any scream, louder than any argument, louder than any desperate plea to be heard. And it begins at the very moment a woman decides to stop explaining herself. When she stops trying to fix what was never broken in her, when she no longer bends, shrinks, or twists herself to fit into the small spaces others have carved out for her, then she becomes something else entirely. She becomes still. But it is not the stillness of defeat. It is the stillness of a mountain, the stillness of knowing, the stillness of strength. There was once a woman who used to pour herself into every conversation. Every time someone misunderstood her, she corrected them. Every time someone underestimated her, she worked harder to prove herself. Every time someone hurt her, she made excuses for them. She exhausted herself by trying to keep peace, to keep relationships alive, to keep appearances perfect. She believed that if she just said the right words, in the right way to the right people, they would finally see her. They would finally value her. But what she didn't realize was that her voice, though strong, was slowly losing its weight. Not because it lacked power, but because it was being thrown into places where no one was really listening. And one day, she just stopped. Not out of bitterness, not out of anger, but out of understanding. She realized that her energy was sacred, that her words were meant for people who could truly hear them. And that silence in the right moment carried more wisdom than 1,000 perfectly chosen sentences, so she fell quiet. Not out of weakness, but out of power. That silence didn't mean she had nothing to say. It meant she was choosing when and where to speak. She was reclaiming her time, her focus, her voice. In silence, she discovered something she had forgotten. Herself. The woman she was before the world told her who she should be, before she learned to dim her light so others could shine. In that sacred quiet, she could hear her own thoughts without the noise of expectation. She could feel her own breath, steady and sure without the chaos of rushing to meet demands. She could feel her own heartbeat, slow and grounded, reminding her that she didn't need to run anymore. She was already enough, already whole. And here is where the story truly begins. Because when a woman stops trying to be understood, she starts to understand herself. When she no longer tries to prove her worth, she begins to feel it in her bones. When she turns inward and listens, not to the world, but to her own soul, she steps into a power that cannot be taken from her. The kind of power that makes people look without knowing why, the kind of energy that shifts a room when she walks in, even if she says nothing at all. It is in silence that the seeds of transformation are planted. In the absence of noise, she becomes more. She learns to watch, to observe. She sees through the false smiles, the empty promises, the distractions. She becomes a mirror, not reflecting others, but reflecting truth. And truth does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it waits. Sometimes it sits with folded hands and calm eyes, watching everything fall apart so it can all fall into place. She no longer reacts, she responds. She no longer begs, she decides. She no longer fears losing people, because she has finally chosen not to lose herself. That stillness, that inner calm, it becomes her compass. And the world, though loud, begins to respond to that frequency. Because energy does not lie. And when a woman stands silently in her power, everything that is not aligned with her starts to fall away. Not because she forces it, but because it simply cannot exist in her presence anymore. And yet, people may say she's changed, that she's become distant, cold, unbothered. But the truth is, she is more connected than ever. Connected to her truth, her values, her vision. She has simply stopped attaching herself to things that do not nourish her. She has chosen quality over quantity, depth over noise, peace over performance. Think of the ocean. Its surface may be calm, but its depth is immeasurable. Its silence does not mean it lacks movement. Beneath that silence, life thrives. It is powerful, vast, and unknowable. That is the power of a silent woman. Still on the outside, but infinite within. Not lost, not small, but aligned. And the most beautiful part is this: when she embraced her silence, when she focused on her inner world, everything began to change. Not overnight, not with fanfare, but slowly, intentionally. Everything she was once chasing, peace, clarity, genuine connection, purpose, began to find her. Opportunities opened, right people arrived, the path unfolded, because the energy of alignment is irresistible. When you stop trying to force life to happen and instead choose to live from your truth, life begins to rise to meet you. So if you are a woman who is tired, exhausted from explaining, proving, pleasing, perhaps it is time to become still, to become silent, not as a retreat, but as a return to your center, a return to your breath, a return to the quiet voice within that has always known the way. Because in that silence, everything begins again, stronger, clearer, real, and you don't have to scream to be heard. You only need to listen to yourself. That is where the power is. That is where the transformation begins. And that is when everything finally falls into place. When a woman begins to focus on herself, a quiet revolution begins. It is not loud, not chaotic, and certainly not messy. It is intentional, it is sacred, and it is hers. This is not about selfishness. It is about survival. It is about reclaiming what has always belonged to her, but was handed out piece by piece to the world. Her energy, her time, her presence, scattered like seeds in barren soil, hoping something would grow, but nothing grew, at least not anything that nourished her. And that is when she decided, enough. She turned her gaze inward, not because the world was unworthy, but because she had forgotten how worthy she was. She had forgotten how powerful a woman becomes when her attention is no longer hijacked by the demands and dramas around her. She began to wake up differently. The mornings felt quieter, not empty, clear, not lonely, free. Her focus shifted. She stopped asking questions like, why did they treat me this way? Or what more can I do for them? Instead, she started asking, what do I truly need? What makes me feel alive? And what have I been ignoring inside myself that is begging to be seen? This shift is not easy. It feels unnatural at first, even wrong. We are conditioned to serve, to tend, to stretch ourselves thin in the name of love or duty. But slowly she began to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Not the peace that comes from the absence of conflict, but the peace that comes from being in alignment with oneself. A peace that doesn't demand permission. She began doing things differently, saying no without guilt, canceling plans when she needed rest, letting people go who no longer added light to her life. Not because she stopped loving them, but because she started loving herself more. She learned that being available to everyone made her unavailable to herself. With every small act of self-prioritization, her inner world grew stronger. And in that strength, she discovered something radical. She didn't need to be everything to everyone. She just needed to be true to herself. That was enough. More than enough. When a woman focuses on herself, people may not understand. Some will call her selfish, some will say she's changed, and she has. Because for the first time in a long time, she's choosing to be whole rather than hollow. She's choosing her peace over their comfort. And as she pours her attention into her own growth, something beautiful happens. Her light becomes undeniable. Her voice, even in silence, becomes magnetic. The very things she used to chase now flow toward her, not because she's working harder, but because she's vibrating higher. It's not about becoming someone new, it's about returning to who she was before the world told her who to be. She laughs more freely, moves with intention. Her presence no longer begs to be accepted. It radiates quiet confidence. She doesn't need to explain her choices because they speak for themselves. She doesn't compete, she aligns. She doesn't rush, she attracts. There's a moment, perhaps a quiet afternoon or a still night, when she looks in the mirror and sees herself, really sees herself, for the first time in a long while, and she smiles. Not because everything is perfect, but because she finally knows she is enough just as she is. Her energy becomes sacred space. Her time becomes a gift she gives with thought, not obligation. She walks away from places that drain her, not with bitterness, but with grace. She no longer fears losing others because she has gained herself. And what a gain that is. When a woman focuses on herself, she becomes a force. She's no longer shaken by noise, no longer driven by the need to fix others, no longer performing roles that exhaust her soul. Instead, she walks grounded. She walks aware. She walks awake. And everything begins to fall into place. Not because she pushed, not because she forced, but because she focused. She aligned. She chose herself. And the world responded as it always does when someone finally remembers their worth. There is an art to letting go that few understand. It's not about indifference and it's not about giving up. It's about choosing peace over chaos, choosing clarity over confusion, choosing yourself over the endless weight of proving something to the world. When a woman learns the art of detachment, she doesn't become cold, she becomes clear, crystal clear. There was once a woman who tried to hold everything together. Her relationships, her family, her work, her identity, like threads in a fragile web, she kept weaving, believing that if she just worked harder, gave more, smiled wider, everything would stay intact. But it didn't. The more she gave, the more was taken. The more she clung, the more slipped away. And in that exhaustion, she realized something. Holding on wasn't strength, it was fear. So she let go. She didn't announce it. There was no dramatic goodbye, no final message. She just released her grip. On the things, on the people, on the roles that no longer aligned with who she was becoming. It felt terrifying at first, like standing at the edge of a cliff without knowing how far the drop would be. But as she stepped back and detached, not from love but from outcomes, something shifted. She realized she wasn't falling, she was floating. She started to see things for what they were, not for what she hoped they would be. She no longer needed to fix what was broken or chase what was running. She stopped asking why someone didn't treat her right. She simply observed. She stopped needing closure from others and gave it to herself. Detachment is misunderstood. People think it means you don't care. But in truth, it means you care so deeply about your own peace that you are no longer willing to trade it for temporary validation. She still loved, she still gave, but now from a full cup, not from emptiness, and what she gave came without strings, without expectations. Her energy became clean, her intentions became pure. Her presence no longer clung or begged, it invited. And those who couldn't meet her there began to fall away. Not because she forced them out, but because she stopped holding the door open. She learned that when you let go of control, you make space for what is meant for you. Her world didn't shrink, it expanded. Her vision became wider, her breath deeper. She noticed the little things again, the way the sun warmed her skin, the way silence could feel like music, the way her own company wasn't loneliness, but sanctuary. She had spent years believing that love meant holding on. But now she understood. Love, real love, never requires force. It doesn't need to be convinced or chased. It either meets you where you are, or it doesn't. And when it doesn't, you bow and you let it go. Not because you're bitter, but because you're wise. With every step she took away from attachment, she stepped closer to freedom. And it showed in the way she moved, in the way she smiled, in the way her silence no longer felt heavy but holy. She had become the woman who doesn't need the world to complete her. She had become the woman who no longer fears walking alone because she knows the path she's on is hers and hers alone. There is a kind of beauty that comes with detachment. It's not loud. It doesn't need attention. It radiates. It whispers, I trust the flow of life. I do not chase. I attract. What's meant for me will never pass me by. And that energy, calm, grounded, unshakable, it draws in everything that resonates. Not because she's asking for it, but because she's ready for it. She's become the kind of woman who doesn't have to seek alignment. She lives in it. And it all began the moment she let go. When a woman finally stops chasing, something magical begins to unfold, not outside of her, but deep within. Her steps slow down, her breath deepens, her vision clears. She no longer feels the frantic pull to run after people, goals, answers, or validation. Instead, she stands still, and in that stillness, the world begins to move toward her. There was once a woman who thought she had to run faster than time itself. She chased love. She chased approval. She chased opportunities. She chased the life she thought she should have by now. And every time she caught something, it slipped through her fingers like sand. The faster she moved, the more exhausted she became, until her days felt like one long sprint, and her nights were spent wondering why nothing ever truly felt like enough. But something shifted. She had a moment, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet awakening. She realized she had spent more time in pursuit than in presence. She had been hunting peace while carrying anxiety, reaching for love with hands that didn't know how to receive. She was chasing alignment with a heart that hadn't yet paused long enough to ask, what do I truly want? And so she stopped, not out of failure, but out of wisdom. She realized the truth that what is meant for her doesn't require force, that the most powerful kind of movement begins when you are still on the inside. She learned to drop the performance, to stop running after the world like it was a train about to leave without her. She chose instead to become the station, a grounded presence, a place where the right people, the right energy and the right purpose could arrive. In this space of no longer chasing, she discovered the power of alignment. She began tending to herself, not as a project to fix, but as a sacred place to nourish. She read what moved her. She spoke what mattered. She honored her intuition, even when it didn't make sense to anyone else. She no longer watered dead soil, hoping it would bloom. She walked away when something drained her. She listened more, not to others, but to herself. And as she focused inward, everything began to shift outward. Suddenly, the very people who once ignored her were drawn to her calm. The opportunities that once felt impossible started appearing with ease. The life she was once running after began to meet her where she stood. Why? Because she was no longer sending out the energy of desperation, of lack, of need. She was radiating wholeness, and wholeness is magnetic. She learned that the universe doesn't respond to begging energy. It responds to belief, and she believed. Not in guarantees, but in herself. She didn't need to have it all figured out. She just needed to trust that standing in her truth was enough. She learned to trust her pace, even when it looked slow on the outside. She stopped comparing her chapter to someone else's highlight reel. She no longer needed loud validation because her quiet self-respect was louder than applause. And slowly she began to glow differently. Not the kind of glow that begs to be seen. The kind of glow that can't be ignored. Not because she was trying to be impressive, but because she was being real. Real with her joy, real with her pain, real with her boundaries, real with her pain. People asked her what changed, and she smiled. Because how do you explain the kind of transformation that comes from no longer needing anything from anyone? How do you explain the calm that comes from knowing that you are no longer in pursuit but in flow? That everything chasing was trying to fix was never broken to begin with, it was just misaligned. She didn't have to scream to be heard. She didn't have to chase to be chosen. She didn't have to run to be relevant. She just had to be present, centered, aligned. And now, she doesn't rush anymore. She doesn't beg. She doesn't force. She breathes. She trusts. She receives. Because when a woman finally stops chasing and chooses instead to align with her essence, she becomes a force that the world cannot help but respond to. Not because she's loud, but because she's rooted. And that's when everything without pressure, without panic, starts to fall beautifully, naturally, powerfully into place. She no longer fears the silence. She no longer fears the solitude. Because within that space where the noise ends and the breath deepens, she discovered the greatest treasure of all, herself. And when a woman finds herself, the world can no longer manipulate her. It can no longer sell her a lesser version of love or a borrowed version of worth. She no longer trades her peace for attention. She no longer lets people rent space in her heart who never intended to stay. She no longer carries burdens that do not belong to her, and she no longer tries to convince anyone of her value. She simply is, and that is enough. There comes a moment when everything changes, not because the world shifted, but because she did. And in that shift, the ground beneath her grows steady. The storms may still rage, but they do not move her. She walks now with intention, not urgency, with purpose, not pressure. Her silence has become her armor, her energy, unapologetically protected, her focus, unshakably clear. She is not waiting to be rescued anymore, because she has realized no one is coming to save her. And that's the most liberating truth she could ever embrace, because she is her own savior now. She is the fire, she is the force, she is the calm before the storm, and the storm itself. No crown was ever handed to her. She forged it herself in silence, in pain, in healing, in growth. And now she wears it not with pride but with peace. If the world ever asks her why she's so quiet now, why she walks differently, why her eyes no longer carry the weight of explaining, she will simply smile. Because how do you explain to someone that you burned to the ground to rise again, that the silence they see is actually a symphony of freedom, that when she stopped chasing the world started finding her? Let them wonder. Let them speculate. The woman she is now doesn't owe them answers. She doesn't owe anyone a version of herself that makes them more comfortable. She is no longer available for guilt trips, emotional tug-of-wars, or half-hearted love. Her soul is far too sacred for that now. She has realized that her worth was never in the hands of those who couldn't hold it. Her beauty was never measured by likes, approval, or popularity. Her success is not defined by noise, but by depth. And depth is what she chose. Deep love, deep boundaries, deep peace, deep truth. She no longer skims the surface of life. She dives, she explores, she expands. Remember these words. You don't become what you want, you become what you believe. She believes now that she is enough. And that belief reshapes her reality every single day. She walks with the wisdom of those who have suffered and survived, loved and lost, trusted and been broken, but never stayed broken. She bends, but she does not break. She pauses, but she does not quit. And to every woman who hears her story, let it echo deep within you. You do not have to be loud to be powerful. You do not have to be everywhere to be meaningful. You do not have to be everything to everyone to be worthy. Your energy is currency. Spend it wisely. The world may still try to pull you in every direction, to distract you with noise, to convince you that your value lies outside of yourself, but the truth remains, when you stay grounded, the chaos cannot touch you. When you move in silence, your results will speak for you. And when you align with your truth, the universe cannot help but respond. So rise not with rage, but with radiance. Walk, not with fear, but with fire. Grow, not for applause, but for your soul. Because the quiet woman who has found herself is more powerful than 1,000 people still searching. She is a lighthouse, not chasing ships, but standing tall and letting them come to her. She is no longer addicted to urgency. She trusts divine timing. She is no longer starving for love. She is full from within. She is no longer dimming her light to make others shine. She is blazing with clarity. And the ones meant for her can handle the brightness. And if ever again you begin to doubt your path, your strength, your voice, remember this. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to stand out. You were never meant to beg. You were meant to attract. You were never meant to settle. You were meant to soar. This is not the end of her story. This is the beginning. The woman who was once defined by the world has now defined herself. And in doing so, she has become untouchable, unforgettable, unstoppable. She is not just surviving anymore. She is becoming. And in that becoming, everything finally falls into place. And it all began the moment she let go.